It's important that we understand the celebration of confirmation as a challenge. Now, this is not just for you about to be confirmed. This is meant as a reminder for everyone who's already been confirmed. Confirmation is meant to provide us strength. It's no accident that the word confirmation has the word firm in it, to be made stronger. That's what God is providing. And the only reason that we need additional strength is because the strength we already have isn't enough. And that's because the Lord is sending us into the world to take up the challenge of the gospel, to carry out the commands that he gives to us so that he can be better known, so that we can grow in our journey toward heaven. Because only when we live the commandments do we grow and change to become more like Christ. And the end of our journey, when we stand before the gates of heaven for judgment, the question that will be posed to us is, have you grown more like Christ? So this is the challenge of our lives. And so the question we should ask is, well, what does it mean to live the Catholic faith? Now, I think for some Catholics, the answer that they give is only half true. Because for many people, the answer to what does it mean to live the faith is a response that talks about coming here, coming to church, going to Mass. This is part of living our faith. But if our answer to what does it mean to live our faith is only answered according to what happens when we're in this building and on these grounds, it's only half an answer. And that's where the challenge comes. Because the demand of Christ is that we also live our faith beyond these doors. That we take up the challenge that he gives to us to say, you will be a light to the world. And so we have to grow in such a way that our lives stand as a light that reflects the love and mercy of Christ in the world. This is the setup for the famous parable that we have today. One of those biblical images that everyone knows, that's used even beyond religious circles, the image of the Good Samaritan. And too often, it becomes so well known that we just associate the Good Samaritan with do nice things for people. Jesus did not tell us the parable of the Good Samaritan with the moral to be do nice things. Rather, pay attention to the setup. It starts with them asking the question to Jesus, what must I do for eternal life? So the answer to the point of the parable is not do nice things, it's what does it take to get to heaven? That's much, much more important. And then when Jesus asks, well, what does the law say? They answer correctly. Love God with your whole being. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then it tells us that he responded to that command of Jesus by trying to justify himself. That is not a good place to be. Because we try to come up with ways that are like a pat on the back. And Jesus issues the challenge. The challenge that is meant to be part of living the Christian faith. Because they ask then, well, who is my neighbor? And the answer that unfolds in the telling of the story of the Good Samaritan is that your neighbor is everyone. And your neighbor is precisely those people that you least want it to be. In our way of talking now, the word Samaritan is synonymous with good person. A Samaritan is someone who does good things for other people. That is the opposite of the way that they meant it at that time. The Samaritan, in the minds of Jesus' hearers, was the worst of people. Someone who had rejected the faith and mixed into their lives pagan practices. Someone who had turned away from the heritage of who they were. The kind of person that they would look at and say, that's the least of those I want to be around. And so part of the challenge of the question, who is my neighbor, is for each of us to stop for a moment right now and ask, who do I least want to treat well? And that's exactly the person that Jesus puts in front of you and said, this is your neighbor. It might be someone we know that we are in a conflict with. It might be someone that we hear in the news or watch on TV that irritates us to no end. That's the person that Jesus puts in front of us. This is your neighbor. So then, if we understand the parable that Jesus tells us, we recognize the challenge of living the faith. We come to Mass for this part of living the faith, for the love of God. We come and worship. But the love of God also provides for us the grace we need so that we can love neighbor, so that we can live the faith beyond these doors. That's why God invites us in, for our own benefit, and so that we can be given the grace necessary to carry out the demand of the gospel. We live in a world where this is increasingly necessary, because it seems that in our society, in our communities, at every level, we are drawing harder lines in the sand, and we are looking at those on the other side as not my neighbor. And so Jesus confronts us directly and says, no, you've got it wrong. Whoever you're looking sideways at, that is your neighbor. Now, he knows that we will struggle with this reality, so he holds up the challenge for us, but then he wants to provide the means to live it out. This is what we celebrate with confirmation. This is what we celebrate when we come to Mass. In confirmation, you are given specific gifts. When you have wisdom, for example, it allows you to look at the world around you and see God present, even in your neighbor, even in the one that feels like opposition. It is only through the lens of God's grace that we can see another person truly as brother and sister, the way God desires them to be. And then when we come to Mass and are literally nourished by Christ himself, well, then the body and blood of Christ that we receive, it becomes a part of who we are. And so in the truest sense, when you leave the church, you do not leave behind what happens in the church. You carry with you the very presence of Christ within you, your body transformed into that you eat. And so we should always approach the doors at the end of Mass with the recognition that we have been changed into Christ. And that because we walk away with Christ in us, we can continue to live our faith. We can measure up to the challenge of the gospel because it doesn't depend on me alone. It depends on what Christ provides. And so as we stand before Christ, we do not try to justify ourselves, but rather we humbly surrender to the power and grace of Christ so that his presence in us can reshape the way that we look at the world around us. So that with the lens of Christ, we can look at all of those people out there, those people that we come into contact with, and we can understand the truth of the gospel. That person is my neighbor.